Growing up, I had some friends and some frenemies, like a lot of us do. One of my frenemies, we went to the same school and we also went to the same church. And our relationship was a really special love-hate relationship where we would be friends and we would talk and we'd have a great time, and sometimes we would annoy each other. And admittedly, I was very annoying. And in return, because I was so small, guys, like this is my full size, right? And I'm still small. I was teensy as a high schooler. Because I was so small and I was annoying my friend, he decided, being huge, like 6'4", like linebacker at 16, that he was bigger than me, and if he wanted me to be quiet, he could make me be quiet. One such way was by picking me up and putting me on top of the bookshelf and just walking away. And there was nothing I could do about it. I was just on top of the bookshelf until he came back. But I decided I could run. So one day, I was being annoying and I saw the look in his eyes, like, you're going on top of the bookshelf today. And I ran. And I was at church and I ran outside looking for my dad, because my dad was bigger than my frenemy. And if my frenemy saw my dad, he'd leave me alone. I didn't see my dad outside. So I ran upstairs looking for my cousin, because my cousin was bigger than my frenemy, and if he saw my cousin, he would leave me alone, but I didn't find my cousin. I ran downstairs looking for anybody who could protect me from being put on top of the bookshelf, and I found nobody. So I made a last-ditch effort to the Pathfinder room, and I ran to the Pathfinder room and I found that the door was locked. And as I turned around to find somewhere else to go, I was trapped in the door jamb because a frenemy had blocked me there. And he looked down at me and I looked up at him and he said, "You're surrounded now." I took a deep breath in, thought of how I could possibly squirm my way out, and then over his shoulder, there was a high-pitched voice that said, "Who's surrounded? Her or you?" Over his shoulder, I saw 3 of my girl cousins who were about the same height and size as me, who had surrounded him. And we jumped him that day. Don't jump, people. But we definitely jumped him that day. I was victorious. I did not get put on top of the bookshelf, because though I thought I needed somebody who was bigger or stronger, really, I just needed friends. And though I thought I was alone and I was trapped, when I looked a little further, I was actually surrounded by family who was there to help me. In 2 Kings chapter 6, there's the story of the king of Assyria who's bringing his armies against Israel. And Elijah prays that his servants their scales will be removed from their eyes, and his servants will see that the chariots of the Lord were all around the Assyrian army. Though Israel seemed surrounded, God was actually the one who was surrounding them the whole time. You might feel as though your struggles in life, your spiritual warfare, your financial troubles, your relationship troubles have you surrounded. But the fact of the matter is that you are surrounded. You're surrounded by God.
What a mighty God we serve. Our God is so strong, He is so mighty, He is so awesome that He has never lost a battle. Wherever you are, I want you to open your mouth and sing this song with us. He is my faithful Father calling me out. dark, and night cannot whisper away what he said in the light. Woo! He is my firm foundation, my anchor won't be moved. Storms may collide, but my soul is on fire with his word. I love this part. When listen to the sound of power on my lips, Jesus has broken the curse. He has never lost a battle, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will. Sing that song. He is my faithful, calling me out of the dark, and night cannot whisper away what he said in the light. Sing to your God that he's your firm foundation. He is my firm foundation, my anchor won't be moved. Storms may collide, but my soul is on fire with his word. Now when listen to the sound of power on my lips, Jesus has broken the curse. He has never lost a battle, and he never will, he never will, he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, God, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, God, you never will, you never will, and he never will, never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, he never will, and he never will, and he never will, never will, and he never will, never will, and he never will. Our great defender, our strong tower, Lord, he's never lost a battle. Sing that. Said he's never lost a battle. Our great defender, our strong tower, God. He's never lost, he's never lost, never lost a battle. He's never lost a battle. He's never lost a battle. Our great defender, our great defender, our strong tower, God. He's never lost, never lost, never lost, never lost, never lost, never lost, never lost. Our great defender, our great defender, our strong tower, Jesus. Never lost a battle. We thank you. We thank you, God, that you are a great defender. Our great defender. Our strong tower, Lord. He's never lost a battle. Do you believe it? He's never lost. Now sing this. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath, sing, in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in us, Jesus, so we pour it out. It's your breath inside of us, Jesus, so we pour it out. Pour it out. It's your breath inside of us, Lord. We pour it out. Let's do it again. It's your breath inside of us. We pour it out. Pour it out, God. You're so worthy of all of it. So we pour it out. I love this part. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Jesus. Sing it again. All the earth will. Our hearts will cry. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Jesus. All the earth will. Our hearts will cry. Great are you, Lord. Let's go. It's your breath. It's your breath. Say. So we pour it out. So we pour it out. It's your breath inside of us. We pour it out. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour it out. Pour it out, God. Inside of us, Jesus. So we pour out our praise. It's your breath in us, Jesus. We pour it out. In our lungs. We pour it out. Sing, great are you, Lord. 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 God, you're so great. You're so excellent, Jesus. Great. Great are you, Lord.
I want to thank you again for the huge honor to speak for your virtual camp meeting. This is us. And Pastor Lyle, thank you again for the invitation. Greetings from Portland, Oregon, and from our Oregon young adult community. I want to talk to you today about what it looks like to live a life of faith. And I want to take you to a story that is one of my absolute favorites because it's an underdog story. And I think, whether you're Hollywood or you like to write stories yourself, so many of us can resonate with the underdog story, kind of that David and Goliath experience where you've got somebody who shouldn't come out on top and somebody who shouldn't have the victory that ends up with the victory. And God, through scripture, shares so many underdog stories of how God was able to do things in people and through people that they could never do on their own. And so one of my favorite underdog stories is the story of Gideon. And you can find this story in Judges chapter 6. But this story of Gideon, I can relate to this so much. And if I could just open up my life in the last 15 months or so, and this is us, this is me just sharing about, what I have been going through. It has been a challenge in the last 15 months during this pandemic to just walk by faith. And sometimes it's hard to get through the day. Sometimes it's hard to get through an hour. And I really look back over the last 15 months, and this has been a journey of faith stretching for me and faith growing for me. And it has not always been the easiest. And sometimes we wonder, like, what is a life of faith supposed to look like? Are we supposed to be confident 24/7? We don't ever waver. We're always believing in the promises of God. I want to just let you know that there are times when I do waver, and there are times when I do have off days and bad days, and I am trying to figure out, what my next move is and what my next step is. And there are times when I have doubts. And so this, looking at a life of faith from the story of Gideon, I resonate with it so much because it's so raw and it is so real. So to just give you a context, Gideon, he is part of the Israelite nation, and his nation is getting beat down by the surrounding nations, by the Midianites. And this really, like so many stories in scripture, especially in the Old Testament, this was an experience where God had promised, I'm going to lead you, and I'm going to provide for you, and I'm going to give you everything you need, and I'm going to pull you forward. And the Israelites decided they're just going to go do their own thing, and they're going to lead themselves. And it just led them down a very challenging path. And so the Israelites are getting full beat down by the Midianites in surrounding nations. And it is really a season of survival. And I'm not sure if you can relate. I know that I can, but I'm not sure if you can relate to being in a survival season where you're just trying to make it through. And, we talk about thriving and thriving and thriving, but some seasons and some days, it just feels more like survival than trying to thrive or than experiencing a life that is thriving. And so Gideon is in survival mode. And every time the Israelites would grow crops and they felt like they were taking a step forward, the surrounding nations would come in and just pillage everything that they had. And so if you can relate to that, how many of us have felt like as soon as we take one step forward, we're taking 2 or 3 steps back? It's like you just want to make progress, and you just want to move forward with your life, and you just want to experience the newness of God. And so they are having that experience, 1 step forward, 2 or 3 steps back. And the Israelites, they cry out to God and they say, God, where were you? Where is the God who saved the Israelites from Egypt? Where is the God that parted the Red Sea? Where is the God that has promised to lead his children? Where is that God? Where is the God of might and power? And so they cried out to God, and God answered. And I just want to encourage you, when you cry out to God, when you open up your heart to God, he hears you, and he will answer you. And so the Israelites cried out to God, and God answered. And God answered in a way that Gideon for sure did not think that he would, or probably the nation didn't think that he would. So God came and he spoke to Gideon. And Gideon, in the moment, he was in the winepress threshing wheat. And so the deal here is that Gideon was threshing wheat, separating the chaff from the grain to make it to bread. and he was doing it in the wine press so it would be secret to not be found out by the surrounding nations, and they would come in and take all of his produce or his product. And so he was in the wine press, and God came and connected with Gideon, and God said to Gideon, in so many words, you are going to lead the restoration of Israel. You are going to lead that, and you are going to be the mighty warrior. And I think in that moment, Gideon's like, you got the wrong person for the job. I am not a mighty warrior. I am not a mighty anything. I am not somebody who has a calling to stand up and lead an army to freedom. Like, I don't have that. You got the wrong person. And so God is telling Gideon, I am about to turn a runt into a warrior. And Gideon, I think in his mind, is saying, no, you got the wrong person. So Gideon responds to God by saying, I am the least, and I am the weakest. I am the runt of my tribe. You have the wrong person. And God does not even engage with Gideon as Gideon speaks those words over his own life. God says, no. He says, you are the mighty warrior. I am going to do something great in you and through you. And we're going to restore the nation of Israel. And so God gives this challenge to Gideon and the invitation to Gideon, and Gideon feels empowered. And Gideon takes a little army, and they go out and they tear down the altar of Baal in the town. And as they tear down the altar of Baal, this raises a ruckus in the town, and people begin to say, we got to go after Gideon. And the words are spoken, if Baal is so powerful, then let Baal defend Baal. So Gideon, in this new identity of warrior, where he used to view himself as a runt, he is now walking in a little bit more confidence, but doubts are still coming in. And I think that's something really important for us to understand. When we walk by faith, it is okay to have doubts. The question is, what are you going to do with the doubts that you have? Are you going to allow your doubts to separate you from God? Or are you going to take your doubts to God so you can work through those doubts with God? And that's a really important point. I think we as a church, we have almost given the message to the younger generation, youth and young adults, that it's not okay to have doubts. And when you doubt, you are not walking by faith. And I would just share with you that it is okay to have doubts. I would actually encourage you to express your doubts to God, because we all have doubts. We are all human. This is us, and we go through things. So Gideon took his doubts to God, and Gideon said, I need a sign. And that's where Gideon, he puts out the fleece, and you see the sign that God gives Gideon, where all of a sudden he wakes up in the morning and the ground is dry and the fleece is wet. And Gideon says to God, well, why don't we reverse that scenario? And I'd like to wake up as a sign that you are with us. I'd like to wake up. And when I wake up, I want to have the fleece be dry and all the ground around the fleece be wet. So Gideon wakes up, he takes that step, and you can just hear the mud as Gideon is experiencing the fleece being dry and the ground being wet. And so God is helping to build up the confidence and faith of Gideon as Gideon is wrestling with his doubts and what he is going through. So Gideon ends up leading this army. And just remember, it wasn't too long ago that he only saw himself as a runt, but God always knew there was a warrior inside of Gideon, and with the gifts and abilities that God had given him. And so Gideon ends up leading this army, and this story is crazy. He's leading this army, and he's going against the Midianites to win the battle, gain the victory, and help restore the nation. When you look at the ratio of the Midianites against Gideon's army, we are talking about 120,000 Midianites to about 30,000 Israelites led by Gideon. And so you think even on a good day, that's not a great ratio of 120,000 to about 32,000. So God calls Gideon to a little conversation, and God says, Gideon, you have too many people. You can't go into battle with that many people. I want to make sure that when I give you the victory, that everybody is confident that the victory was given and the victory was experienced because of the hand of God, not because of the hand of Gideon or the hand of men. And so God tells Gideon, call your people together, call your 32,000. And I want you to let them know and tell them, if any of you are afraid, you are to go home, and you can go home. And so Gideon, following the Lord's command, he gets up in front of this 32,000, all these soldiers, and he says to his group, if any of you are afraid, you can go home. You don't say that to soldiers. You don't say that to warriors. You don't talk about fear when you are going into a battle. And Gideon says, if you are afraid, then you can go home. And you can imagine nobody moves. I mean, if I were there, I wouldn't move. Nobody moves. So I'm thinking all of these 32,000 soldiers, they just stand there paralyzed. Nobody is moving. And maybe there's a little bit of conversation that begins to happen within the ranks where somebody says, hey, are you a little bit afraid? I'm a little bit afraid. Are you a little bit afraid? I kind of am afraid. I kind of am afraid. Do you want to go home? I kind of do. Should we go home together? Yeah, let's go home together. Okay, we're going to go on the count of 3, but don't mess with me. Like if we count to 3, we got to really go, because I don't want to be the only one going. We've got to go together. How many of you growing up knew people that always had to function in groups? Like they always had to move as a group, go as a group, go all over as a group. And so when this is all said and done, thousands leave. Matter of fact, it's like 22,000 soldiers leave because they got a little bit of fear in their heart. And so Gideon is now left with 10,000 soldiers to go up against the 120,000 Midianites. But he's still operating by faith, and he's still moving forward, and he's still taking those steps. And so Gideon continues moving toward this battle, and God again comes to Gideon, and God says, Gideon, you have too many people. I've got to bring you to a place when I give you the victory that people know the victory has been given to you because of God's might and God's power. Sometimes we are allowed to go through what we go through so God's power can be shown to be greater than the experiences that we are having, than the circumstances that we are in. And so God tells Gideon, I want you to call your men together, and I want you to tell them, go drink by this brook or by this river. And if they put their mouth down in the water, they're to go home. And if they take water and bring it up to their mouth, then they can go ahead and stay and be part of that core team. So Gideon brings his warriors over to this creek or this river, and he watches them drink. When this whole scenario plays out, this is crazy. All of a sudden, Gideon is now left with 300 soldiers. His team is 300 to go up against 120,000. You may feel like in your life right now that there is a mountain standing in front of you that is too big to climb. It is immovable. There is something going on in your life that seems absolutely impossible. But I want to remind you that God is in the business of turning impossibilities into possibilities. God is in the business of turning problems into possibilities. So what you may see as so big, such a roadblock in your life, that roadblock can be overcome by the power and the might of God, and God will get the glory for that. And so Gideon, he moves to the Midianite camp, and they end up surrounding the camp, and Gideon is still having doubts, and he's still having questions about God's leading. And I just want to bring this point home to you. When you have doubts, that doesn't mean you're not walking by faith. It is okay to have doubts. the question is, what are you going to do with the doubts that you have? But I think we have done a disservice to make walking by faith, to make it look like it's a doubt-free experience. I have doubts about how my life is going to play out, what's going to be around the next corner, but it's about taking your doubts to God and not allowing your doubts to separate you from God. And so Gideon, he still is having doubts. And so God leads him on a reconnaissance mission. And so Gideon and a few of his men, they go down to the Midianite camp and they overhear one of the Midianites talking about a dream, a vision that he has had, where the Israelite camp gets the victory in this battle. And so God, again, even in the middle of doubts, is giving Gideon those encouraging little moments where he steps forward in faith, where God affirms his presence, where he affirms his leading. And so Gideon, empowered by this new vision, he goes up to his team and he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a strategy together. I want you to lay down your weapons. I want you to lay down your weapons. And you can imagine the uproar in this group of 300. Say what? Like, you don't want us to have any weapons? Lay down your weapons. And in place of weapons, I'm going to give you a trumpet and I'm going to give you a clay pot with some fire. And so you can imagine these soldiers saying to themselves, so I'm supposed to lay my weapon down and I'm going to carry dishware and a musical instrument into battle. I mean, just like the thoughts that would be going through these soldiers' mind, we're never going to get the victory. How is this going to play out? And again, it's a step of faith by step of faith. And so Gideon tells his crew, when I give you the signal, we're going to surround the Midianite camp and we're going to blow the trumpets. We're going to break those clay pots with that fire, and God is going to do a great work. And so on Gideon's command, they do that. And a frenzy breaks out in the Midianite camp, and the Midianites end up defeating themselves because of this frenzy of hearing so many trumpets blowing at one time. And in biblical times, a trumpet was the sound as a battle was starting, would be a single trumpet blow. So psychologically, you're hearing 300 trumpets blow at the same time, and this frenzy just took place, and the Midianites ended up defeating themselves. And again, God got the glory. What does this have to do with a life of faith? I think, for one, when you talk about the theme of this is us, it reminds us that even in Scripture, people had doubts and people had struggles and people were going through real things, and people at times were taking one step forward and 2 or 3 steps back. So what does a life of faith look like? I think a life of faith looks like remembering, no matter where you are in the moment, remember how God has led you in the past. Remember that it is by the power of God that you are still here. It means remembering that you have survived, and hear me on this, that you have survived 100% of your worst days, that you are here because God has sustained you, that every moment in your past where you thought, I'm not going to make it, I'm not going to get over this mountain, you have made it. And you have gotten over the mountain. It doesn't mean there's not more mountains, but it's a miracle that you are here, and it's by God's power that you are here. And so walking by faith often means remembering how God has led us in the past. And I know, because I've been there, having those moments where you think, God, you're not going to come through. This isn't going to happen. My wife and I, Kim, we have been praying about something for our family. We have been praying about something for 15 years. And I can't give you tons of detail, but we have been praying about something for 15 years. And there were so many moments in that prayer journey where we wondered, is God ever going to answer this prayer? Is it ever going to happen? And I want to tell you, in 2021, in January, it happened. And what we had been praying for came to fruition, and it had been 15 years. And it's just, part of that faith journey to remember how God has led you. And when you think about God has led you, no matter what you are going through now, you can reflect and remember that if God led you in the past, he is definitely going to take care of you in the present. And so part of that journey of faith is remembering how God has led you. It's also making sure that what we speak over our own life is in harmony with what God has said about us. When Gideon was approached by God, Gideon said he was the runt, and God said, no, you're a warrior. Gideon said, I don't have the value, I don't have the worth. And God said, you are valuable and you do have worth. And Gideon said, I can't do anything. And God said, you are a mighty man of valor. You are a mighty warrior. And I'm going to do things in you and through you that you could never do on your own. And so you got to make sure in this journey of faith that what you speak over your own life, it matters. The loudest voice that we often speak into our own life is our own voice. So make sure that what you are saying about yourself is in harmony with what God has said about you. If God calls you a warrior, you need to call yourself a warrior. If God calls you great, you need to call yourself great. If God says you are his son or daughter, you need to claim that you are a son or daughter every single day. So make sure in this journey of faith that you speak the promises and truth of God over your own life, because your voice matters and your voice speaks loud into your own life. So make sure you remember how God has led you in the past. Make sure that what you say about yourself is in harmony with what God has said about you. And then number 3, make sure that you take your doubts to God. And remember that it's okay to have doubts. I have doubts. This is us. I have doubts in my life, but take your doubts to God. That's my encouragement. Take your doubts to God. And if anybody has doubts that you think are just too big and too grand, I just want to encourage you. God can handle your doubts. God can handle your questions. God can handle your yearnings. God can handle your hopes, and God can handle your dreams. But if you have doubts, don't let the fact that you have doubts devalue your journey of faith. If you have doubts, take your doubts to God. Talk to him about them as many times as they come up, and trust that God can handle your doubts. And then finally, step number 4, you got to step forward with courage. And that happened with Gideon with the altar of Baal. And it happened with Gideon as he ended up sending home those 22,000 soldiers who had fear in their hearts. And it happened when Gideon took that step of faith and he sent home the soldiers who were not bringing the water up to their mouth. And it happened with Gideon when he went down and did that reconnaissance mission in the camp. And he came back and did the step of faith and courage by asking his soldiers to lay down their weapons in exchange for a musical instrument, and exchange for a clay pot and some fire. And so in this life of faith, this journey of faith, you're going to have doors that open up, and you've got to be willing to take your next step. And I think that's one of the things in the story of Gideon that I've learned is Gideon didn't know what his next step was. And you probably don't know what your next step is, but as God reveals the opportunity, take that next step as you move forward in your journey of faith. This is us. This is real talk. This is the journey that so many of us are on. And for me, this is the real faith journey. It's the journey of remembering how God has led me. It's the journey of making sure that the words I'm speaking out of my mouth about myself are in harmony with what God has said about me. It's about me being okay with having doubts, but taking my doubts to God. And it's me taking my next step of courage as God opens up the doors of opportunity for us. I want to encourage you, during this virtual camp meeting, journey forward by faith, and trust that your current situation is not your final destination, and you can move forward by faith and God is going to get the glory as he moves your life forward. So thank you again for the incredible opportunity to be here with you for the camp meeting, this virtual camp meeting. This is us. And I'm just going to pray that all of us can really embrace that realistic journey of faith as we move forward. This is us.
People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children, generations of every nation, our kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. you have